understand why her friends did not communicate well with her. She felt often left out. She had a difficulty reading other people's emotions. And what I asked her mom one day was, I said, can I take her to the pet store? Your daughter loves animals. So I took her to the pet store, and she had an immediate connection, right? With the dogs, with the cats, with the birds, with the fish. She had a really immediate connection. And through that connection, we were able to talk about emotions and the way you treat animals and the way the animal responds to you. And from there, I was able to bridge it to her friends. And that the way she treated her friends was going to have an impact on the way they treated her. And that was a breakthrough we had for this young woman. And from that moment on, I was like, oh, I cannot be in a clinical setting because kids can't get it. It's very intimidating, even for an adult to sit in a clinical setting. So I see kids at Starbucks, I see them at parks, I see them on the playground. We do all sorts of fun stuff, hopefully helping them feel safe and comfortable talking about difficult things. In the last few years, obviously, we've talked about a lot. I've done a lot of different speaking engagements on things from anxiety and depression to parenting in the pandemic. And I would tell you, as a parent of teenagers, I was telling Julie this, like, we're all like, I need help. There's not one in the bunch that wouldn't raise their hand and say, I need help. Sometimes when our children are little, we maybe haven't had to approach that yet. And then something happens about 12 or 13 where you don't know who your child is anymore. And you don't know who they're gonna be from day to day. And one thing you kind of can't expect is that they might not want to talk to you anymore. That's pretty normal, right? We went through it. We were all there. And so what I've done is just done some parent education on what it looks like to stay in the game with our kids. And I'm so glad you guys are here because it starts obviously immediately, okay? And so when we talk about confidence, let me grab my notes. So you might, when you have a child, you start reading. I don't know if some of you are readers. I wasn't a great reader, and I had twins, and so nothing worked at first. And I would look at, we didn't have podcasts, so I'd read, I would watch some things, I would talk to friends who had kids, and nothing worked because my children were not the same people. They were born at the same time with very different temperaments, in which they both still are that way, twin girls. So I would think about what are some of the qualities I want my kids to learn. I want them to be kind. I want them to be caring. I want them to be empathetic. And as they have grown into being young adults, and my oldest are girls, one thing that I guess I didn't think about is that I wanted them to be confident. I wanted them to learn how to manage themselves. And that's really hard for me as a parent. Because the more confident my child becomes, the less they need me. And I'll say it again because that hurts a little bit. And you guys have little ones who you dress, you do everything for. The more confident our children become, the less they need us. So it is a ripping off of that Band-Aid a little bit at a time. My third child was born into the world overly confident. She has a huge personality, was very physically capable. She would take herself to the park at 2 years old, and I would find her walking down the street. She just believed she was capable. So confidence, they're laughing because they had her here. She's still that way. So I want to challenge your idea of confidence because I actually, even though I tell you about my third, I would actually challenge us to think that kids are not born with confidence or without it. It's actually a skill they can learn. Yes, some are going to be more outgoing, some are going to be less outgoing. That's okay. Confidence doesn't need to bank on your gregariousness, your friendliness. Sometimes we attach confidence to those type of people, right? If they have a lot of friends, they're confident. Well, we all know that a lot of kids with a lot of friends are not confident. But in our head, we still attach confidence to these worldly things. And we sometimes think that our introverts are less confident, which is really tragic. Because a person that can be comfortable on their own, that's confidence. Extroverts sometimes need other people to feel good. So we're just gonna flip that idea upside down a little bit and say that confidence is, I assume that's first Wednesday of the month?
It's a tornado awareness week.
Yep, great, I'm glad we're safe.
It's practice.
Ours went off, I think, in that area earlier today, so that's okay. I want you to rethink about what confidence means. And that confidence is actually a skill that can be taught, and it's a skill that can be learned. And if you think about the first job interview you went on when you were 17 or 20, you probably didn't knock it out of the park, but you learned. and you learned how to carry yourself. You learned how to speak to adults. You learned what to wear, right? You learned all sorts of things. That was building your confidence in yourself, in the way you carry yourself. So what we want to do as parents is think about, how could we build confidence in our little people? How can we teach them that whether they're outgoing or introverted, they can still be personally confident? How can we teach them that they can learn to solve problems? So here's the real thing. Confidence is not a feeling, it's a way of thinking. My daughter, who would walk herself to the park, just was kind of like, I know where I'm going. We went to the park every single day. I can do this. She didn't know that it was incorrect to not go with the parent at age 2. She just knew that she knew the way. She felt like there was a problem that she could solve, okay? There are a lot of kids who have a lot of problems that they don't know how to solve. That is kind of the age that we're in right now. We have an emotionally charged world. We have an emotionally charged system that we're bringing our kids up in. The best gift we can give them is the ability to manage that for themselves. So what is confidence? I want you to think tonight that confidence is actually a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that says, I can solve this. I can figure this out. Small example, my son and I were out shopping at Sierra, and I had put my swimming lesson sign up online, and something was wrong and everyone was getting every spot. And I was like, oh no, they didn't put in one person per spot. So it's all messed up. Like, it was just a chaos, and I'm shopping, right? And I'm panicking, and he says, Mom, whatever it is, you'll figure it out. And I was like, he's right, that's confidence. It was a problem, needed to be solved, and I would figure it out. So how do we instill that in our children, especially at a very young age? Can be very challenging, but I would encourage you to think about that it begins now. So, let's see if I can get that to flip. What are steps that we can take to be building confidence in our kids? There we go, thank you. First, this is nobody's favorite, but I'm gonna say it. I would encourage you to check your own temperature. I'm gonna say it again. I would encourage you to check your own temperature. Again, we live in a world that's pretty heated. It's hard. It's hard to wake up and not see conflict everywhere. It's hard to put your kids to bed and not feel sometimes afraid. It's hard to not look at high school and think, ugh, how did I survive it? Those are very normal feelings. So I would encourage you as a parent to check your own temperature. I know that if I go into a situation with one of my children, and I always use this terminology that you go in with your fists up, right? What's gonna happen? We're gonna fight. If I go into any conversation with my 17-year-old daughter and my fists are up internally, it's done, because she's 17 and she's always got her fists up, right? That's her, she's gotta kind of figure that out in the world. So if my temperature is rising, guess what? Our children will follow us. So we know from research that kids are not great communicators. When they want something, they cry, they stamp, they throw tantrums. That's how they communicate. What they are is they are great perceivers. So again, if my temperature is rising, my child will match me. In therapy, I did all my practicum with a gentleman who does a fair recovery, which was pretty impressive. And he would talk about Anger Mountain. And he's like, families live in Anger Mountain where one climbs and the other matches. They climb and they match, and they climb, and when they get to the top, it's an explosion. And that's where pain and hurt and anger and frustration happen, right? And so his challenge always to couples was, don't match it and see what happens. Just change your pattern. And then suddenly that anger has nowhere else to go because it's not being driven. So when you think about your own children, and I don't mean check your temperature like the world is scary. I mean, check your temperature on how are you feeling as a parent? How are you feeling letting your child go to school every day? How are you feeling letting them, one of my kids dressed herself. Probably remember, she dressed herself every single day, and it was awful. And she wore a bathing suit and a backpack to the other bus stop, to my other daughter's bus stop, every day. And the neighbors would say, we come to the bus to see what Rachel's wearing. I was a terrible parent. And I had to check my temperature on what was happening in me at that moment. She's my child that will do something different. She doesn't march to the same drum anybody else does. And I'm so happy as a young woman, that's part of who she is. I want to encourage that. I want to give voice to that. But it means that some of it's gonna feel a little off sometimes. And we live in a community here in Twin Cities that's got like a nice box that we kind of want to stay in. And when our kids don't, we gotta check ourselves a little bit. When our kids press us, or when the world presses us, the last year has been so pressing, right? We could all check our temperatures. I mean, the whole world could check right now. So on that, when you feel like that maybe the last year has challenged you in moving forward with some things you might typically do and we feel fear, check your temperature. The kids can read it. I ask every student I see, does your parent you out of fear, anxiety, or love? Gosh, I would hope they would all say love. Do you know what most of them say? My mom's really anxious. And that's okay, because it's real. I would encourage us to not parent from that place. I might cry to myself, or to my spouse, or to my dog, because he's an awesome listener. And that's real, right? That's a space for me to process my feelings. But I try not to parent out of that place. Because when I do, I'm probably not the best parent that I can be for my children. So, I know that's a difficult one to hear. I would encourage you to think about checking your temperature. And then if you can use that language and you have other people raising your children, encourage them to check their temperature. We had 2 sets of grandparents. One let everything happen, right? Everything. And the other one had very different rules. And we had to navigate that. And we, as my husband and I, had to check our temperature around that. So, check your temperature. That's number 1. Number 2, notice the messages you're sending, but you don't know that you are. When I work with teenagers, I'll say, what's important in your family? Ding, ding, ding. They can tell me right away. Sports, hockey, my grades, that I go to college. They can tell you right away what's happening. We pulled my daughter from school she's a great gymnast. We pulled her from school for 10 years to drive up to Champlin and go to this gym and train with the Olympians. And she would say, how come I can leave school to go to practice, but I can't leave to go see my friends? We had to answer those questions. We did not know we were sending messages like that. That is the same daughter that's like, I didn't go to school today, Mom. Like, what do you mean you didn't go to school? Well, we have been pulling her from school to go to sports. That was a message we sent. Other messages we send that we don't know we're sending, certain things have value that we maybe don't want to give as much value to, right? Certain relationships, certain things that we hold close to our hearts. Think about the messages you're sending. Our kids, if you live in anywhere in this community, your kids, my high school students tell me, like, my parents don't need to push my grades. The society does that. They're gonna be fine. They are all excelling, even the ones that don't think they are, they're still excelling. So is that a message we're sending, that this is what makes you feel valued, that you're successful? Those are great things for you to think about and talk about. You can even ask your kids, they can probably tell you. Those are unfortunate things that we sometimes have to step back on and say, didn't mean to communicate that. So what are the messages you're sending? And then I want you to think about, just check my time, that confidence is a learned skill. It's something that we can teach our children to recognize in themselves. So you might have, I work with a family that has 3-year-old twins, and she'll tell me right away, one of them speaks for the other. Well, what does that do for that child? What does it do for both children, right? I work with, actually was with Julie at a party, and I came and told her, I just told this mom to stop answering for her daughter. Was at a Super Bowl party, and I couldn't handle it any longer, because I had this girl at church and I knew her, and the mother answered every single question I asked to the child. So think about the things that you can teach your children. It's gonna hurt a little bit because it's gonna be ugly, okay? It's gonna feel like messy. Can they make decisions for themselves? And some of them you're not gonna like. Look at your childhood. Did every decision you make, did it make your parents happy? And I think about it now. I still don't tell my mom everything. At some point in life, that was a natural break. Obviously not when they're 3, 4, and 5, but if we don't give them the ability to think of themselves without us, when does that happen? They need to grow up and see that they are separate from you. They're great. They're the best part of what you have both given them, but they're not you. That's hard. That's us saying, you're making a different choice than I would make. And then congratulating them on that. Oh, good job. Oh, and obviously if any of you have older kids, you'll learn that you learn the poker face really fast. Oh, that was great. And inside you're like exploding and you want to run to the bathroom or pull your hair out, and they put on something that doesn't match, or they do something that you might not do. This age they're probably not going to be super naughty, but think about how you can give them the ability to problem solve, to make decisions. If confidence means looking at something and saying, I can figure that out, then when we roll it all the way back to preschool, they need to learn to figure things out. So look around your house, look around your days, look around whether you're going to Target or not. I know for kids that were born in the pandemic times, you're probably not doing some of that. Those are experiences they need to learn to figure out. I had a mom tell me, we took our daughter to Target for the first time and she sat in the cart like she was in Disney World. It was the greatest thing ever. And she keeps saying, Mommy, when do we get to go back to Target? And her mom's, just said, we started ordering online and never did it. And then what she learned was then her daughter would come home and have meltdowns. She was so overstimulated. She did not know how to handle herself. So they went back to ordering online. Okay? It's difficult. It's challenging. We have to step into those challenges. Her daughter can learn how to handle a cart at Target. Why? Because we want her to handle kindergarten when there's a hallway and a lunchroom, which is good. That's where friendships happen. That's where they learn to read other people's emotions. You cannot have empathy if you're not in relationships, right? Those are things that we will see possibly from the pandemic that will have an effect on our children when they didn't get to be close to other people for some time. I have all these middle schoolers that have so much social anxiety because they spent 2 years out of school. Well, so parents will call me and say, should I keep them out? That's hard. It's really hard. They want to protect that child, and I'm sure as a teacher you're seeing that. And the best thing that child can do is tiptoe in and learn the skills, because guess what? I can handle this. So look at your life and say, where can I give my child some problem solving skills that they can master? Because confidence isn't because my daughter was athletic. She's confident. No, I want her to be confident because she solved a problem. Someday the athleticism gone, right? Lots of kids are confident because they're getting great grades. What happens when they don't? That's what we see. How many of you have older children? Anyone? Yeah, parents will call me and say, my daughter's never gotten anything under an A and I'm terrified. She's going to college and she can blow up. Yep, you're right. She's probably gonna blow up. So learning how to accept some of those things, not because a B or a C is bad, but because then we learn how to problem solve. How to look at a situation and say, I can handle this. And I feel really proud of myself when I figured that out. Think of the Boy Scout idea that they build and do everything on their own. Not because you're really ever gonna be stuck in the woods with nothing. It's just probably in today's world never gonna happen, and they're still doing camp the way they did it. They still have to start a fire from nothing. They gotta do it all, because that builds confidence in those kids, learning how to manage themselves. I don't think my buzzer went off, but I think we're about at the end of time. 1 minute. See if I have any other thoughts here. Other things you can do is draw attention to their personal wins. Find things they're doing well. Maybe it's not a success like you got a good grade, but you were kind, or you handled that situation. That was difficult, wasn't it? We had to wait in line at Target, and that was difficult. And Mommy and Daddy were on their phones, and we just looked at people, because that's a way to engage with the world. And people are different than me, and that's healthy. If we want our kids to learn how to be with people that don't look and feel and act the same, they have to be in the world to learn how to manage those feelings and those experiences. But that can be uncomfortable for all of us. So notice their personal wins. Feelings, obviously I would not call myself a feelings doctor because I'm not a doctor. Some people use that phrase. Your kids in this world will have a lot of feelings. It's much different than when I was in high school, and much more talked about. Here's the last thing I'll leave you with. And you can just put this in your mind for later. If your child is not suffering or experiencing something of anxiety or some depression or some worry, somebody they know is. And it is a part of their world. It is just hands down a part of their world. The CDC says 1 in 6 high school students had a plan for suicide in the last 2 years. 1 in 6. That would be some of our children if they were older. And so kids are feeling, there's nothing wrong with feelings. We just need to learn how to manage them. But I was just with a 12-year-old, she said, no one in my family talks about feelings. She's 12, she can see that. We go to the rooms, we shut our doors, take a shower, talk to the dog. So she's learning her own skill set outside of her family. So try not to be worried about feelings or afraid of them. Some of them are ugly, and that's just okay. It's like the tantrum. Sometimes you have to step into the tantrum to calm it down, right? Same thing. Imagine your 13-year-old is going to have a 13-year-old tantrum. It looks different, hopefully, but we have to step into that space so we can calm them down and not be afraid of it, and that's okay. So I think we're at about 20 minutes.
Okay.
I can open the floor
you
for
have
questions.
Questions.